All right, what's up? How's everyone doing? How's everyone's Monday afternoons going? Uh, the Giants, you got a few stories floating around, and I got a few minutes to talk about them. So I'm going to discuss Shane Bowen still has a job as of 1:36 Monday, November 17th. It's unbelievable. This guy has been allowed to be employed as long as he has. Going to discuss that, and then this Abdul Carter report that came out earlier today. Kind of had a feeling that this was on the horizon as to why Abdul Carter didn't play the first snap against the Packers this last week. So we're going to discuss that. The reasoning behind that decision for Mike Kafka is out now. I want to talk about it. That's important. It highlights a few different points that I'd like to make here. But let's start with Shane Bowen. Because as of yesterday, that was the fourth game this season in which the Giants defense, I guess the Giants as a whole, were up in the fourth quarter and lost the game. So four fourth quarter blown leads. It's on no one else besides the defensive coordinator. Mike Kafka comes in. The Giants don't make any changes. You kind of had the sentiment floating around yesterday at the end of that game and a couple hours after that by all the beat writers was that the Giants and Mike Kafka as an extension were going to make some changes. And everyone just assumed that that'd be the defensive coordinator. And now here we are at 1:38 on Monday, November 17th. Shane Bowen is still employed by the Giants as defensive coordinator. And it begs the question, what the hell more do the Giants need to see from this guy? What are they doing? What is the reason behind keeping this guy? What is the reason? With Dable, you kind of thought, all right, that could be the scapegoat. Shane Bowen will go down with the ship. Dable will save his job because it was Shane Bowen's fault. Well, now look what happens. Mike Kafka's coaching for his life, essentially here. This is a golden opportunity that he's been afforded with Ryan Dable's firing, but instead of cleaning house, and doing what's right for this team, which is firing Shane Bowen, he decides to keep him. And again, it makes no sense to me, and it will continue to make no sense as long as Shane Bowen is still employed by the Giants, and that is where we are today. I really thought that Bowen was going to be gone by this point. I really thought so. I felt the same way about Brian Dable. Brian Dable was gone. And this is just different, apparently. And as many issues that Brian Dable had, as many concerns that people had about Brian Dable, they pale in comparison to what people think about Shane Bowen. Because at least you had some other side of the argument. There were two sides of the coin. Yeah, 85% of the people were on one side, and the 15% were on the other, but at least some people thought that Brian Dable deserved to keep his job. And now here we are. Shane Bowen still has a job, and Brian Dable has been fired. When it's like 99.9 to 0.1%. In terms of people who hate Shane Bowen and want him gone versus people who actually want to keep him. I don't think I've seen one person on social media say that Shane Bowen deserves to keep his job. Like, it's not a point that you could argue. There was no logic behind it. You can't add any facts to it. You can't make a logical argument as to why you think Shane Bowen should still be the defensive coordinator of this team. It makes no sense. It really doesn't. And if you think that there's some reason behind it, if you think that there's some ulterior motive from the Giants, then please let me know. Please, because I cannot fathom this decision or this lack of decision. And, if you want to point out having Shane Bowen as defensive coordinator is going to help the Giants continue to lose games because they want to tank, fine, so be it. Why did they do that 2 years ago? Why didn't they try to tank then? Why did they try to tank last year when they clearly needed a quarterback? Oh, wait, because no one does that. No one tanks. This isn't the NBA. But you see the blatant tanking. This signals one thing and one thing only. I guess there's a couple of things. But the main thing is this season is lost. We don't care how we finish. Shane Bowen is going to stay because he's the worst possible option as defensive coordinator, and we want to lose, which is not the case. It isn't. I'm just trying to reason with myself here and with you guys as well. The guy's the worst defensive coordinator in the sport. I don't think that's hyperbole to say. You look at all the defensive metrics, and I saw this, I think it was by Doug Analytics or someone. I know Justin Pettick of Talking Giants posted this. But essentially, it was a graph that showed each team's defensive efficiency down the stretch of games in the fourth quarter. And as you could say, like, there's a whole plot graph and, the average, the mean going up like that. I guess where the Giants are at the bottom left. Worse than any other team in the NFL, to no one's surprise. The guy is atrocious. No one wants to play for him. It seems like every single person has given up on him, besides Brian Burns. Dexter Lawrence had a good game. Maybe that's because he didn't like Brian Dable. But you could get the sense that these guys have given up on Shane Bowen. That's the other side of things. Not just like, okay, that part doesn't make sense, the fact that he's still in play. Like, the players aren't trying hard for him. The players don't go out there and bust their asses because they don't like the defensive coordinator. You need a leader amongst men as your defensive coordinator. You need an alpha male. You need a guy who can go out there and command the respect of the entire locker room, defense, and even offense as well. Shane Bowen is not that guy. We've seen it over and over and over again. The defense wasn't good last year. It's not good this year as well. And what was the Giants' biggest strength going into the season? What did we say in training camp and maybe early in minicamp? The Giants' defense would be near the top of the league, and their offense would be the issue. Who would have thought it would be the opposite? Who would have thought that the Giants would actually strike gold with their quarterback? And the defense, which was looked to be the strong suit of this team, ends up being their Achilles heel. It's confounding. It really is. And you have this guy in Shane Bowen that's just, I don't know. We got some people saying hi, hello, hi, probably bots. What's up, bots? Yeah, I mean, I can't fathom it. I can't fathom this continued lack of decision to do the obvious, which is fire Shane Bowen. Giants will continue to lose. The Giants will continue to be a laughingstock of the defensive end as long as Shane Bowen continues to be employed by the Giants. And now going off of that, because I feel like I've done enough, and you also could check out my TikTok. I did a TikTok earlier today about my reaction to you're not a bot. Sorry, Jorge. My bad. Just assume with the hi. So you heard this report. I don't know if you missed it, look it up. It's pretty damning on this Giants organization that the reason why Abdul Carter was benched for that opening drive was because he fell asleep in the team facility during a practice. He fell asleep during a practice in the facility. Speaking of unfathomable, that's unfathomable. That your number 3 overall pick is falling asleep in East Rutherford in the Quest Diagnostics practice facility. And here's the most damning part of this report. Because yes, Abdul Carter is a grown adult. He's 22 years old. He should know better. Everything is a reflection of your head coach. And who was the head coach of Abdul Carter the first 10 weeks of the season? None other than Brian Dable, the guy who's unemployed. And what did we read in this article? Brian Dable refrained from disciplining Abdul Carter in the past for pulling this kind of shit. And instead of by week 11, this being figured out, this still continues to be an issue. He's clearly immature. He's clearly got an ego. I mean, the guy asked for Lawrence Taylor's number going into the season. F off. F off. You don't get that. You don't deserve that, especially after this report. The laziness is just off the charts. The ego on Abdul Carter is just insane. And we know his talent. Giants fans, we watch the games, game in and game out. He's very much more impactful on the field than his stats on the box score imply. We give you credit, Abdul Carter. You're a good football player, all right? We understand. We know. Giants fans won't give you an excuse for acting like an idiot just because you're good at football. They won't. This isn't college. There's no threat of you going and taking millions of dollars at another school with NIL. There isn't that. The Giants control Abdul Carter and his contract for the next 4 seasons. Four full seasons. They've got the 5th-year option. They're going to extend him, obviously. He's under contract and a rookie scale deal for the next 4 years. So you better suck it up and figure it out, or else your career might get derailed. So we're not going to trade you. Also, how bad of a look would it be if Abdul Carter asked for a trade during his rookie contract? You don't see that too often in sports. Can't remember the last time I've seen that at all. I think maybe this could be solved with a new defensive coordinator and new coaching staff. And yes, the blame falls back onto Abdul Carter for being a grown adult and acting like this. But the fact that Brian Dable refused to act on this and to correct these mistakes, that's saying a lot. And it's an argument that was made a lot out there by, the various Giants fans and whatever who, maybe wanted Brian Dable to stay. And even if they did want him to leave, still defended him for some of his football decisions. My biggest gripe with Brian Dable, not denying that he was an amazing and still is an amazing football mind. He will get a job elsewhere and he'll be very impactful in whatever job he gets. But what I said is this guy is way too immature to be a head coach in the NFL. You saw it with the outburst when it came to Wink Martindale. That terrible breakup, that divorce. That didn't reflect positively on either one of those guys. You saw it on the sideline. Brian Dable losing his cool a lot. And you saw it with what happened with Russell Wilson coming into the game, Jackson Dart going into the medical tent, and Brian Dable doing something that none of us have ever seen, run into the medical tent with the quarterback that they signed for big money out on the field. Playing. While your rookie quarterback was in the medical tent, you decided to essentially eat a $100,000 fine because you couldn't wait 2 extra seconds to see if your quarterback was fine after he came out of the medical tent. That's who we're talking about here. That's who this guy is. And you may wonder, why is Abdul Carter acting up like this? And yes, again, he's a grown adult. He can fix this on his own. Some of the blame has to come back to the head coach, that this hasn't been corrected. Wellesley says, what's up? How's everything? I feel like it's a sneaky good thing to keep Bowen so we lose out and Shane gets fired. Like, that might be the one explanation, but Shane has the power to tell Kafka he's got to go. So that, that doesn't make much sense. Also, we could draft Caleb Downs, who we desperately need in the second. Yeah, I mean, in my own opinion, the three areas the Giants need to look in the draft, the two areas the Giants need to look is secondary and their linebackers. Those two things. They need a defensive tackle. Darius Alexander has been somewhat underwhelming this season. They need, and I don't know what's going to happen with Bobby Okereke. I'd like to see Micah McFadden extended, even though he's been out with an injury. Cordell Flott is up for an extension. He needs to be brought back. He's been the unsung hero of this Giants secondary this year. He deserves to get paid. Of course, there's the uncertainty regarding the right tackle and the right guard with Illuminor's contract being up and the Giants. I assume that they want to bring him back depending on what he wants in the open market. It's not like he's young. He's kind of near the back end of his prime. And then with the right guard, with Greg Van Roten, I just don't see the Giants bringing him back as well. Those are some areas they need to address. But I think most importantly, the secondary, the linebackers, and the third is the wide receiver. When the Giants went out and they signed Darius Slayton, re-signed him for 3 years, $36 million. I don't think any one of us could have predicted for his tenure. His tenure has been whatever, but this season after he got paid, being as bad as he's been. And of course, he was signed as the number 3 receiver. Number 3 receiver getting $12 million a year is pretty insane. And of course, the thought was Malik Neighbors going to play and be healthy the entire season. Of course, injuries happen, but if you get paid that much money, you got to step up when it matters the most. And it mattered the most when I keep saying Abdul Carter. My mind is on him right now. When Malik Neighbors went down with that injury in week 3, or was it week 4 against the Chargers? So those are some areas the Giants are going to need to focus on in the draft. They addressed their lack of depth at edge rusher. It was more just like, all right, this guy is the best available player on the board, and we're not in a position to draft based off need. I don't believe in that at all across the NFL or any other sport. We've seen so many teams make big mistakes reaching for guys because they fit the scheme or whatever, yada, yada, yada. And within 2 years, that player is not a fit for the scheme. And you look back at the guy you could have drafted, and it's not a good look. With the Warriors, one example that comes to mind is the Warriors drafting James Wiseman over LaMelo Ball. LaMelo Ball has been hurt constantly, but LaMelo Ball in that offense with Steph Curry would be otherworldly. And maybe he'd be more of a winning player and would be injured less. And of course, hindsight's 2020. We don't know that, but James Wiseman is now a bench warmer in the NBA. So you don't make that move. The Giants made the move, the correct move, and they drafted Abdul Carter. And, now they figured that out. They've got the depth there. It remains to be seen what they do with Kayvon. He's under contract for one more year, whether they trade him, whether they resign him this offseason during the next coming year. That's another story for another day. That's an argument that I would like to have with Sean Morash on One Giant Step podcast, wherever your podcast, check that out. But back to Abdul Carter. And there's a couple of sides to this, and I touched on the Dable aspect of it, and Abdul Carter being a grown man and being able to figure this out on his own, him just not doing it. But also, the situation here is that he fell asleep in the practice facility, I assume, during a Shane Bowen walkthrough. Has it gotten to the point where the defense is so dejected, so deflated at this point in the season when it comes to Shane Bowen? Is that crazy to say? Am I off base here? Am I grasping at straws here? I don't think I am. And that's why it kind of ties all back into this is guys just don't respect Shane Bowen. You could say what you want about Brian Dable and him not reprimanding Abdul Carter and this behavior that supposedly has been going on all season long. That doesn't necessarily need to be the head coach's job. It ultimately is. At the end of the day, everything comes back to the head coach. Understood. But if you had a defensive coordinator who guys respected, who had command over their entire defense, I can guarantee that's not happening. I said it earlier. When you want a defensive coordinator, the number one quality, of course, the number one quality is they know defense. And they've got a good defensive scheme. They know their personnel, and they utilize them in the best way possible. But guys that are leaders amongst men. Shane Bowen is not that guy. He doesn't command the respect needed from a defensive coordinator. And you look at what Abdul Carter did. And you come back to this and is it because Shane Bowen is just such an idiot and no one respects him that this could happen? Whatever it is, it's not a good look. And it's about damn time that Kafka, punished Abdul Carter for this. You got to stop this. You got to buck this trend. He's a young guy. He's also a grown adult. Sometimes guys with egos, it takes a couple of years for them to learn how things work. It takes them a couple of years to get out of their own way. Especially a guy like him, who people were saying was the most talented guy in the draft. And he comes to the Giants, they're not winning at all. They're 2-9. The defensive coordinator's a joke. I can't say that I wouldn't blame him. But if there was ever a situation to do this, I'd say it's pretty excusable. Even though it's very inexcusable, it's the most excusable situation out of all of them. The Giants were in a better position to win. If a defensive coordinator wasn't a joke, then we can get on him a lot more. But those intangibles are there. The defensive coordinator is a joke. The head coach in Brian Dable was immature. Those intangibles were still at play. And Mike Kafka is trying to, to assert his will in this locker room. I mean, if he wants any chance to come back next year, obviously one is the results on the field and winning. Number two is commanding the respect of the locker room. Look what happened with the Raiders a couple years ago. Antonio Pierce takes over as interim head coach. They win a few games. The team loves him. He's a leader amongst men. Mark Davis was left with no choice but to bring him back. And he brings him back. And look what happened. Wasn't a good head coach. The reason why he was brought back is because the players and the fans left him no choice. And I think that's what Mike Kafka is trying to establish here. The only issue is people are not going to take him seriously as long as Shane Bowen is still employed. Neither him or Joe Shane. This is just inexcusable. And I hate to come on here and keep harping on this point, but the team doesn't take Shane Bowen seriously. They don't. And it doesn't take some rocket scientist to figure this out. You look at the lack of effort this entire season long, that can be drawn back to a couple of things. The main one being Shane Bowen. The guys just don't like playing for him. So when you read that story about Abdul Carter, I don't blame you if your mind couldn't help but immediately focus in on Shane Bowen. And the guy's not taking them seriously. And that is where we are right now. And that's why people consider this organization to be a joke. Because how do you continue to employ what so many people believe to be the worst coordinator in football, and Shane Bowen? And it's not just the Giants fans. It's not just the Giants media, but it's now national talking heads who are calling this out. It is astonishing how little Shane Bowen has been able to do with this defense, considering the talent on that end. That is what we will always come back to. Last year, defense not as talented, still sucked. Pretty sure, metrics-wise, they might be worse this season, which is astonishing. Astonishing. Considering the improvements in the secondary with Holland and Adebo, and I think the value in Adebo doesn't lie in necessarily what he brings in the field. It's what other people could not bring on the field if they played instead of him. He's pretty above average cornerback. He's no cornerback one. Cordell Flott has been better than him this year. But playing Paulson Adebo means you don't keep saying Abdul Carter. You don't get Deontay Banks. And that's been the biggest issue behind Paulson Adebo's injury. But it doesn't matter. The excuses have run out for Shane Bowen. They've run out after the Broncos game. Should have been fired after that game. For him making the exact same mistake he made against the Cowboys and playing a prevent defense when all they needed was a field goal, the opposing team. It's just really frustrating. And it makes me think, it makes me believe that Joe Shane might be an idiot. He might just be stupid. And we've given him too much credit. I really just don't think he's doing himself any favors by continuing to employ Shane Bowen on this coaching staff. And I'm not going to put the blame on Joe Shane for hiring Shane Bowen in the first place. I've harped on this point a million times. If you've missed it, go back, watch or listen to any One Giant Step we've done. Sean Morash. That this guy just he's an idiot. He's an idiot for doing this. It makes no sense to me. It's again, like as I said, it's very confounding. And Joe Shane is just he doesn't deserve to keep his job at this point if this is going to be a thing. If he's going to ride the season out with Shane Bowen as defensive coordinator. And Mike Kafka literally just took over the Giants. You can't tell me he's got full autonomy. They'll probably say he has full autonomy, but he's got to run it up the totem pole. Are you telling me he can make a decision on his staff without telling Joe Shane and getting permission from ownership? No. Absolutely not. I'll never buy that. Concerning times, the Giants. Even though they might be in a really good spot to get a top pick and to potentially trade down and get some assets, with already one of the most talented young rosters in the NFL. I don't think that's hyperbole. Like they've got a lot of top end talent on this team. And the right coaching staff, the right defensive coordinator, they'll be able to get this right. I think there's going to be a lot of people looking forward to next year. And there are a bunch of, the coaching candidates and the short list. It's terrible. They're all awful. Hopefully those change. It's obviously very fluid. It's November 17th. Black Monday is in for another month and a half. And as of right now, Mike Kafka is still the head coach, interim head coach, which I kind of feel is just unfair to him that all this conversation is going on when technically he still could earn the job full time if the Giants rally around him and he looks like a competent head coach. That's enough. That's enough for today. I got everything I wanted to get out about Abdul Carter and Shane Bowen. I still don't understand how Shane Bowen is still employed. Abdul Carter's got to figure it out. The coaching staff needs to be more harsh when it comes to him being an idiot and falling asleep in the practice facility in East Rutherford. That's just unacceptable. And it's amazing that the Giants have a head coach that's willing to actually enforce what needs to be enforced when it comes to this. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you all very soon. Peace out.